Hi there, I'm Christine Perkins, Executive Director of the Whatcom County Library System, and I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about the Whatcom County Library System's budget, as well as the proposed levy lid lift, which will be on the August 5th, 2025 election. We'll start by going over some of Whatcom County Library System services, then we'll review our budget and talk about some library levy lid lift basics. The Whatcom County Rural Library District is an independent junior taxing district, like a fire district or a school district. It is not part of Whatcom County government, even though we have that same first name. That describes our outside borders of our library district, but we do have a hole in the middle for the city limits of Bellingham. Bellingham Public Library is a city department of the city of Bellingham and is completely separate from the Whatcom County Library System. We have our own policies, our own board of trustees, and our own budgets. 2024 was a great year for Whatcom County Library System. Over 59,000 cardholders checked out over 2.1 million items, which works out to be about 36 items per cardholder. If you were one of the people who didn't check out 36 items, just think about how many items someone else must have checked out to keep that average high. If people had purchased all of those items at full retail price themselves, they would have spent over $42 million. Last year, there were more than 550,000 visits to Whatcom County Library System locations, and almost 55,000 people attended 2,200 programs. There is some event, program, learning opportunity, story time happening at every one of our library locations each week. At Whatcom County Library System, we believe in the power of sharing. So that means you can check out items from our physical collection, like books, DVDs, magazines, and more. We now also offer things in our collection, like ukuleles, board games and puzzles, Wi-Fi hotspots, and even check out Washington backpacks complete with Discover passes. Online, you may be used to using our Levy app to access resources like ebooks, e-audiobooks, and e-magazines. We also provide access to online resources like Consumer Reports, Ancestry.com, Value Line, and Creative Bug. And we have access to online local newspapers like Cascadia Daily News and Bellingham Herald. Some of our other library services include our bookmobile. Bookmobiles have been an important part of Whatcom County Library System since our earliest days, serving some of our smallest communities in Whatcom County. Right now, our bookmobile goes to places like Glen Haven, Wickersham, South Lake Samish, and Birch Bay. Our library team serves people who are homebound. We deliver materials to people at their homes, sometimes in senior living facilities, and we also send books by mail to people who can't get to the library in person. We have a staff member who visits the jail. That's one of our services we offer. And another important one is the meeting rooms that we offer in many of our libraries around the county. What you can see in the right-hand corner here of your screen is a meeting pod that was recently installed at the Blaine Public Library. We were really fortunate to get a generous gift from a woman, Joyce Vanderpool, to do something meaningful and needed at the Blaine Library. And what the community needed was a quiet space to meet one-on-one with each other without bothering other people. That meeting pod is in use almost every day. There are people in there doing tutoring sessions, online meetings, interviews, telemed sessions, etc. It's been a really great addition to that small library. You'll also see on your screen a picture about the Fridge. That is a pilot project that we've been working on with Sustainable Connections. It is a free refrigerator located outside of our North Fork Community Library in Kendall. That community does not have access to a full-service grocery store, and many of the children in that school district qualify for free or reduced lunch, which indicates that there are families in that community for whom food is a source of concern, and access to food is really necessary. So volunteers from Sustainable Connections gather donated food from local restaurants, groceries, deli cases, and make that available in the Fridge for people to come and pick up. We're leveraging the location of the library and convenience good parking lot, good lighting, and making more resources available to people in the community. That cute little detective guy is a symbol for a project we worked on with the National Science Foundation and the UW Center for the Informed Public. It was designed to help people learn how to spot online scams, particularly when shopping online. So we have a dedicated website that has information and quizzes that people can take that help them become more savvy online shoppers. One final service I want to make sure you know about is our Connect Ed program for K-12 students. We allow every student in Whatcom County at every public school district, as well as the Lummi Nation School and Linden Christian schools, to have library accounts connected to their student ID number. Now, every kid knows their student ID number because it's associated with their school lunch number. So they know that number and they can use it to place holds on public library materials or access online resources through the public library. In some cases, we actually deliver public library materials directly to the school so that students can easily access those materials. That's really important right now because many of our school districts are really struggling financially, and in many cases, they have actually eliminated their school librarian positions. And in some school districts have actually shut the door on the library, and students do not have access to the library during their school day. So we feel like it's important to step up and make sure that students have access to quality literature and informational resources for their studies. Whatcom County Library System has programs and events happening all the time. We do those in the library and also out in the community. Of course, there's always Children's Summer Reading Program and our story times that happen weekly. We have pop-ups at community celebrations like Pirate Days in Blaine, for example. We have teen clubs and chess clubs and Shakespeare camp for kids. We have educational workshops and social events for people of all ages, and of course, book groups. Our Whatcom Grooves series brings music to many of our communities across Whatcom County, and all of these are available free of charge to whoever wants to join us. Now, all of these services aren't free. They do cost, and they are funded primarily by property tax revenue. In 2025, over $10 million of property tax revenue came into Whatcom County Library System to provide all of these services. As a reminder, that includes funding for our library collections. We have over 670,000 physical and electronic resources. I also want to add that because of an interlocal agreement that we have with the Bellingham Public Library, you can access hundreds of thousands of materials that are held by the Bellingham Public Library as well. And we offer an interlibrary loan service where you can borrow books from any library in the country or even the world. So your taxes allow you access to almost any item that you can possibly imagine. This tax revenue covers technology for the library system, both the public access technology like computers and internet and Wi-Fi in our buildings and parking lots, as well as access to printers. We've heard from a lot of people that they no longer keep a printer at home and rely on the library as their place to come in and print things out when they need to. Our library budget covers the operations for 10 different library locations and one that is in construction in the Birch Bay community, as well as funding for our bookmobile. It also covers furniture, fixtures, and equipment to turn all of those library buildings into a functioning library, as well as funding to maintain the interiors of all those buildings. We pay for 168 employees to work for Whatcom County Library System, and we're really proud of providing good paying jobs for people in all of our small communities across Whatcom County. Our staff are busy providing public services, a whole range that we've talked about today, as well as the support services to the people who are providing the public services. And I want to point out that our support services sound like huge departments, but they're not. Often it's really just one or two people. For example, in HR, we have one HR director. In payroll, there is one payroll administrator. In accounting, there is one accountant. You get the idea. This budget does not include major capital projects for the library system. In fact, we rely on each local community to provide the building in which we operate the library. And we have agreements with all of our building owners to provide library services there. So $10 million is hard to put in context. So let's look at what it costs for an average household each year to support the Whatcom County Library System. I just did a little research to find that the median assessed value of property in Whatcom County outside the city limits of Bellingham is about $600,000. Sounds like a lot, doesn't it? If you multiply that times the library system's current levy rate of 26 cents a thousand, you will see that the average or median household in Whatcom County is paying $13 per month. If the levy rate were to increase to 42 cents per thousand, that would be an additional $8 per month. And I want to point out that the maximum levy rate that is allowed by Washington state law is 50 cents per thousand. You might be saying, yeah, but what really do I pay for my property? And is it hold with that? You can check it out yourself by going to the Whatcom County Assessor's website, doing a property search, and looking for the line that says Rural Library. The base paid amount is the annual amount paid for that property. And you can look that up even if you're not a property owner. You can see what your landlord might be paying for where you live. So why am I talking so much about property taxes? Well, this chart shows you that 95% of our library system revenue comes from local property taxes. We do get a small amount of money from other sources, like grants that we could get from the state or federal government or other sources. We also do get a small amount of the Whatcom County timber tax revenue. That's proceeds from the sale of timber in our county. However, that amount has been declining over the past few years, and we are trying to reduce our dependence on that. In terms of expenditures, most of the money that we take in gets turned around in providing public services to all of you. So 73% covers the direct services and staff for our library system. About 13% of our budget goes towards library materials that we check out for you to use. So let's take a look at our levy rate history. In 2009, the levy rate was at 34 cents a thousand. And the Board of Trustees knew that the district was struggling to keep up with expenses with the amount of money that that levy rate generated. So they brought a measure before the voters to approve a levy lid lift to raise the levy rate from 34 cents to 44 cents per thousand. In 2010, that new levy rate went into effect, and then over time, the levy rate has fluctuated, varies based on what the total assessed value is for the properties in the Whatcom County Library District. Until now, the levy rate has dropped actually lower than it was in 2009, 2010. We're at 26 cents per thousand. Back at the time of the last levy lid lift 16 years ago, our board had the foresight to start by taking the additional revenues generated by the higher levy rate and using that money to add to the fund balance of the library system, essentially like a savings account. And they started adding to that fund balance in anticipation that one day revenues would again be lower than the expenses that we needed to pay, and we would start needing to draw down that fund balance. They told voters back in 2009 that that cycle was going to take about 5 years, and they expected that they would be coming back out to voters to again lift the levy rate in about 5 years. Through a combination of circumstances, our library system was able to stretch that period until about 16 years. And now is the time that we see that we have started to draw down the fund balance And if we continue to do this moving forward, by 2030, we will have no more fund balance from which to draw. So what else has changed in that 16-year period? Number one, our library district population. That's the population of Whatcom County outside the city limits of Bellingham. It's grown over 18%. Those of you who live in Birch Bay or Everson or Kendall know that there are houses popping up all over your community, so I'm sure you will not be surprised by that level of growth. In the past 16 years, the library system adjusted our open hours to try to accommodate those new people moving into our community. We added Sunday hours at our two biggest libraries in Ferndale and Linden, and we added some Friday hours in the summer in Point Roberts and on Lummi Island to accommodate summer visitors to those locations. We also added a new branch library in Sudden Valley. It's called the South Whatcom Library. And so overall, our operating hours for the library system increased 22%. What's really amazing to me is the number of items checked out from the library system in those past 16 years. That has increased 47%. So people are finding us and really digging into using the library system in a robust way. Library card holders has increased 56%. And just as a point of reference, our minimum wage in Washington State has increased from $8.55 per hour to $16.28 an hour. That's over 90% increase. Now let's take a look at some operating budget projections that we have come up with for our library system over the next several years. If you look in the column for 2025, you'll note that our beginning fund balance is almost $10 million. That sounds awesome, until you realize that we are projecting annual expenses for this year to be about $11.5 million, which is over $800,000 more than what we anticipate bringing in revenue. Our operating deficit this year will bring down our fund balance to about $9 million by the end of the year. If we continue in this pattern without adding any operating hours or services or staff members, but we do account for inflation, we anticipate that the operating deficit in 2026 will be over $1.1 million, and that the deficit will continue to increase every year after that, bringing down our ending fund balance. You'll notice that the column for 2027 is marked in yellow, because this is the last year that our fund balance is sufficient to cover our cash flow for the library system. You may remember that we make most of our revenue from property taxes, and those are collected twice a year, in April and October. We need to make sure we have at least 3 months of our operating budget in reserve in our cash flow reserve in order to make sure that we can pay our bills. We would need to make payroll, we need to keep the lights on, we need to keep buying new materials. That amount in 2027 is approximately $5 million. So you can see that 2027's ending fund balance will just be enough to cover that cash flow reserve. However, in 2028, the fund balance dips below what we need for cash flow reserve. And if we continue on that same path, by 2030, we won't have enough money at all in our ending fund balance to proceed with operating. With all of this budget forecasting on the horizon, our library system held a series of budget listening sessions in February and March of 2025. There were 11 different sessions, including one online session where we worked with local community members to talk about ways to decrease services for the library system or alternatives for increasing revenue. Some of the activities we did included weighing in on choices that the library system might have to make if we had to reduce services in the future. For example, is it more important to provide evening hours for people who work during the day, or is it more important to provide Saturday hours for people who work during the week? We gathered all this information and used this to help make decisions moving forward. Let's go back to our spreadsheet. Remember, in 2027, the ending fund balance is starting to get to the level where we're gravely concerned about being able to meet our cash flow reserves. So one of the activities that our budget listening sessions attendees took on was trying to figure out how to reduce the operating deficit in 2027 to balance the budget. You'll note that the target they were trying to reduce was about $1.4 million. And just for a point of comparison, our entire library materials budget for the year is currently $1.275 million. That means if the board chose to eliminate the entire book budget for 2027, they still would need to reduce several $100,000 more in expenses in order to balance the budget that year. And furthermore, they would need to continue to eliminate the book budget for every year after that, meaning we wouldn't have any new materials moving forward at all. One of the questions that came up in our budget listening sessions was whether Whatcom County Library System could use volunteers in the place of paid staff members. And I want to report that we do use volunteers. In fact, volunteers provided over 10,000 hours of service to Whatcom County Library System in 2024. We are really grateful for all the efforts of those volunteers. However, if you look at how much work that equates to, it comes to about $167,000 value to the library system and doesn't come near making up the $1.4 million that we would need to actually balance the budget. Also, we have a collective bargaining agreement with our local labor union that prohibits us from replacing paid staff work with unpaid volunteer labor. So the kinds of things that we can ask volunteers to do is very different from the kinds of things that we can ask paid staff to do to actually operate the library. At our budget listening sessions, we had some good conversations with people about the various options available to us regarding private fundraising. Whatcom County Library System is incredibly lucky to have the support of 10 Friends of the Library groups who raise money to benefit their local branch libraries. If we give a generous estimate of how much each Friends group contributes towards the library system, and we estimate that at about $10,000 per Friends group, which is a generous estimate, that would mean that Friends of the Library groups are contributing about $100,000 worth of value towards the library system each year. That is a phenomenal amount and represents all of the amazing fundraisers that they do, book sales and plant sales and bake sales and other fundraising activities. However, that does not go far enough to help us reach our operating deficit needs. We also have the benefit of a Whatcom County Library Foundation, another nonprofit organization that is comprised of largely volunteers. These folks seek out larger corporate donations, bequests, and other grants in order to fund system-wide projects across the Whatcom County Library System. This group works diligently throughout the year, but their annual income is generally between $100,000 and $150,000 a year. Combined, despite their best efforts, our Library Foundation and our Friends of the Library groups simply cannot raise enough money to make up our operating deficit. At the conclusion of the budget listening sessions, our Library Board of Trustees met to talk about the best path forward, and ultimately came to the realization that the number of cuts necessary to meet a deficit target were so significant that they would negatively impact library services for years to come. For that reason, they decided to pursue a levy lid lift election and have agreed to put a ballot measure on the ballot for August 5th of 2025. This slide shows the proposed wording for the proposition that you would see in the voters' pamphlet. You'll note that the district is asking voters to restore the regular property tax levy up to 42 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. Just as a reminder, the cost for an average household for the library system at a 42-cent levy rate would be about $21 per month. That's an increase of $8 per month versus what is currently being paid. So let's talk a little bit about how the levy lid lift actually works. It is a one-time lift in the levy rate that resets the levy amount, and by state law, the levy can only increase up to 1% after that. So year one, 2025, median-priced home at $600,000 pays a levy rate of 26 cents a thousand, or about $13 per month. If a levy lid lift is approved by the voters, the levy rate would go up to 42 cents a thousand, and that median homeowner would pay $21 per month. In the third year, the levy could only increase an additional 1% at a maximum. So you would take their annual levy amount times 1%, and you would see that they increased by about $2 over the entire year. If the levy proposition passes, Whatcom County Library System will be able to maintain current open hours and services without changes. We could continue to support a robust collection of current and relevant library materials, including physical and digital items, with reasonable wait times and online and streaming resources. And we could protect our community investment by addressing deferred maintenance and facilities needs. And finally, we could create seed money for library building projects for things like matching grants. If the library levy proposition fails, we would need to reduce the investment in library materials, including physical and digital items, which would increase wait times for popular items. We would cut staff, reduce open hours, and eliminate some services, which may include closing branches 1 or 2 days a week. We would defer building maintenance and limit all of our facilities repairs to emergencies only. And finally, we would eliminate any seed money for library building projects, which means we would be unable to assist with matching grants. I know I've gone through a lot of information with you here today. I encourage you to reach out to me if you have further questions. I can be reached via email at christine.perkins@wcls.org. I'm happy to share whatever information I can about the levy lid lift or about how our library budget works, and I thank you for taking the time to listen today. Goodbye.